It's your girl Jazz, aka at that curly top. Welcome if this is your first time, and welcome back if you've already been here before. And today I am really excited to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is how to quit fast fashion. If you clicked on this video, you probably already know what fast fashion is, and if you don't, you could do a simple Google search and you can just get the whole download about what fast fashion is. And if you learned what it is and you clicked on this video and you're like, oh my god, this is so overwhelming, it's taken over my entire life, I am here to help you because that was me. I quit fast fashion back in 2016 and it was a journey to me getting to that point, but once I did, I was like, I can't go back to this. Like, this is just like so horrific, both to the planet and people, and even to my own life. And I don't want to use this video as a place for debate. This is for those who have made the decision for themselves that they personally want to quit fast fashion and want to start a slow, sustainable fashion lifestyle. So this is just a tool and guide for you. And this is also just a starting point. Like, there's so many layers and nuances to the conversation. And that's the other part where it's just like, it's just so overwhelming to like figure out where to start. And I hope this video can really help you out. So let's just jump into it. So I first want to start off with my own personal story of why I made the decision to quit fast fashion. Growing up, fashion was just always a way for me to express myself like many others. And I grew up in a low-income community, so with that too, I already wasn't really able to afford clothes in itself. So thrifting, DIYs, like that was already something I was a part of, something that was already part of my conversation growing up. But when I went to college, I was like,
my goal when I graduate is to start the next
21.
Because that was just in my mind so grand and so great. I was studying fashion merchandising and I was like, this is amazing. And I was like, oh, this seems like there's like parts of this that seems like there's like some sketchy stuff going on, but I was like, oh, it's fine, I'll just like ignore it. But then I joined my university's anti-human trafficking club because I was like, oh, sex trafficking is bad. But then I heard about labor trafficking and I was like, oh, what is that? And they told me all about how fast fashion is one of the biggest proponents of labor trafficking, where people are forced to work in horrific conditions for very little to no pay, and it's basically like modern day slavery. And I was like, sick. But the thing was, for me, I heard the information, it was so overwhelming, and then I was like, I'm gonna ignore all that because that is too much for me to handle right now. And if it was that bad, this would be illegal. Like, they wouldn't allow these things to happen, which again, Google search that because that's false. A year later, I ended up taking an ecology and conservation course at my university, and through it, I learned to love the environment for the first time, seeing how we all interact with the planet and people. And at the very end of it, they wrapped up the entire semester by saying how our consumption is basically ruining everything that I just learned to love. And the current fast fashion industry was one of the biggest proponents of why everything's basically being destroyed. So I was like, sick. I can't keep going on wanting to be in fashion without wanting to be a part of change. So that's where I am at personally, and it's been a journey for me to get here. It didn't happen overnight, but I'm still learning, still growing, and figuring out everything. When little Jazz first heard about all this and she was super overwhelmed, I think these are the tips that I would have given her that would have been really helpful. Like, if someone just told me right from the get-go like what I should do, this is what I would say. So let's jump into them. So 1, do your research. So doing your research is very important, because I think it's one thing to hear someone tell you how bad all these things are, but then once you start reading and watching and like seeing people with credible resources actually give you the download of like what's happening, I think it becomes more real. And you'll also have like a foundation of facts that you can grow from, because I feel like if you're just basing off everything you do off of like what other people are saying, your foundation kind of crumbles in a way, because you don't have any actual reasons or facts of why you're doing what you're doing. And also, I feel like those facts bring you a little fact check of reality of where we're really at and what's really happening. So it kind of just like helps ground you. Some resources that have helped me: I love the fast fashion documentaries. True Cost, that is my favorite one. If you haven't seen that and you're still like kind of on the edge of like, oh, is fast fashion that bad? That is the best documentary I've ever seen. I recommend it to everyone. River Blue is also really good. This really touches on the denim industry, and it kind of just like gives a really good encompassing view of what's happening in the fast fashion industry as well. And there's different sustainable fashion hubs like Fashion Revolution, Slow Factory, and Garment Work Center. And all of these and many more just provide so much information about what is currently happening and giving you the facts and giving you like actual steps of what to do. So I love all of them. And also just like credible, sustainable resources in general. Like the New York Times has a really awesome like climate section, Eco Watch, there's Inside Climate News, and there's just so much out there. Simple Google search, help you out. And 2, I would say to go on an unfollow spree. So going on an unfollow spree, the main reason for this isn't to boycott any of these brands, but more so for you to like get away from the temptation of having to buy. Like I know for me, once I finally unsubscribed from like their emails and social media and like other fast fashion influencers who are pushing so much of the marketing of buying these things all the time, like once I finally unfollowed all those things, I was like, oh hey, like I actually forgot about them and I don't need to know about every single sale that happens every single day. I was like less anxious about having to buy all the time, and also like not being reminded and removing yourself from the marketing in general just like is always helpful. And I feel like also not only are you able to remove the temptation of having to buy, but I also feel like you kind of are able to be in your better space where you're like, hey, what do I like? What styles actually fit me? What colors make me feel good? You're able to really find like your own sense of style, and I feel like that was like one of the biggest revelations I had. A huge journey to get to where I'm at today. It's been 5 years of that, 6 years of that. It's been a really beautiful journey, and it's nice to really be able to like have confidence in what I wear and in my own voice. So once you go on an unfollow spree, you're gonna wanna go on a follow spree. Now that you've gotten rid of like negative influences, I feel like it's best to like now have better and more positive influences into your life, constantly informing you, constantly encouraging you, and providing resources for you to be able to find more sustainable like brands and have more sustainable fashion habits in general. I know for me, it was really hard when I first came onto the scene like a couple years ago, because it was like there was like no resource, like hardly any. But again, like I just feel like sustainable fashion is now more so in people's conversations, and some influencers and just like people in general who just like inspire me daily are Aja, Aditi, Benisha, and honestly there are so much more. Like there are so many amazing people who are part of this community who are ready to encourage you and inspire you and just figure this all out together, because it's literally a journey and we're trying to like make the world a better place together. From there too, there's just like such a network of people you can follow from there, so I would recommend to do that. And 4th is following the hierarchy of needs, which this is my favorite tool to use. Oh my god, like once I discovered this, like this was just such a game changer for me. I believe that this was started by Sarah Lazarovic, which she has this amazing graphic here. Basically, the model is based off of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where the actions that are at the bottom need to happen first before the ones at the very top. What's so cool about this is that when people first want to quit fast fashion, they're like, oh my god, like sustainable fashion is so expensive, which it is, and for good reason, which we could jump into later. The thing is, like once you enter into a sustainable fashion lifestyle, like you don't have to buy every new sustainable brand out there. The whole point of ethical fashion is to really just like slow down our consumption as a whole. And so let's just kind of go through the steps that we can take before we have to buy anything new. So 1 is to use what you have. This whole concept just basically means to like love the pieces that are in your wardrobe. So like if you have a closet full of fast fashion pieces, love them. That is the most sustainable thing you can do. Will be the most loved in your hands because you already have them. And if you want to spice it up a little bit, I like to follow the sustainable fashion 3 R's, which I think I kind of came up with that. Which the first R is to rewear. Hashtag rewear that to the day I die. We want to be able to wear things over and over again, because we've been taught that like, oh, you just want to buy one thing, not trendy in the next season, so you just check it out. But it's like, no, like figure out ways that you can like rewear it. Say like you have like a cute dress, wear it throughout the spring and summer, look hot, hot girl summer. But then once the winter, like fall winter comes, like maybe try to like layer it and incorporate that. And the second part is to repair. Instead of throwing something away, try to fix it. So for me personally, I'm pretty bad at doing this by myself. We're all learning and growing here together. You could take some ripped jeans to the tailor, or if you ripped a sleeve or a button popped off, like a little sewing kit, and just re-sew it back together, and now you can keep wearing it. And the third R is to recycle, which this doesn't mean necessarily like having to take something to like a recycling center, but just like, hey, if you have like a t-shirt that's completely like jacked up, maybe see if you can turn it into another DIY. I've seen people do this all over TikTok, so they do so many cool DIYs where they like turn t-shirts into cute bralettes or into cool dresses, or they'll like put cool patches on top. Like there's so many fun DIYs you can do. Always a plus in my book. So now going on to the second part of the pyramid is borrow. So borrowing is a lot easier when you live with people who you actually want to use pieces from the wardrobes. But I personally like to borrow pieces from like my friends who live around town. I feel like so often it would be, oh my god, I'm freaking out, like I have nothing to wear, and you're like having to run to a fast fashion store to like find a cute dress like last minute. Well, you can cut that time if you have friends who are gracious enough to let you borrow things. And even this applies to like people who are creating content, like even for me now, like I do this, like I did this with a recent post where I wanted like a specific look of a dress for this post, but I didn't currently have something on hand, but I knew my friend Gabby did. So I asked her if I could borrow it, and she let me do that. So that's pretty sick. And also this goes into the next part of the pyramid, which is swap. We don't realize that if there's a piece in our closet where I'm like, oh, that's not really my vibe, there might be one of your friends who's eyeing it that like would be very happy to have that on their hands. And also I just miss clothing swap parties. I used to love going to like clothing swap events. I used to host them, you just go to them. You would bring all the pieces that you didn't really want but were like in good condition still, and just like have like a fun party where it's free or a donation based thing. You just go ahead and just swap, and like now all your pieces find a happy home. And the fourth part of the pyramid is to thrift, which if you've been following, you probably know this is my favorite part of the pyramid, but obviously I want to take the other steps before I get here because I want to be very mindful of how you're thrifting. I'm gonna drop a note on the gentrification of thrifting, just because we can't just like switch our fast fashion habits for our thrifting habits. Like we need to be able to just like slow our consumption overall. So a lot of people overbuy. I'm trying to be better about it too. And also I just think we need to be more mindful of like what pieces that we're buying in general, like buying what you need. And if it's like a certain season where like, especially in the winter season, like try to stay away from the coats, because for low income communities, sometimes it's their only resource to be able to find like some nice warm clothing. And if you're just taking them all and you don't need them, it's kind of like, you know, same with like upper sizes, like don't take all those things. Like there's hardly any pieces that are already made for those bodies. So respect them, and there's just so many nuances involved, but that's just an overview. But being able to thrift first before buying something new is always great in my book. You're able to divert those things ending up in landfills. You're able to give those pieces new life and a new home where they're like well loved. And if you end up choosing a thrift store that is a local charity community based one, you're able to really directly support your local community and those charities, and I think that's really sick. And it doesn't have to be in stores. Kind of like secondhand shopping sites that you can check out, like Depop, Poshmark, ThredUp. And there's also vintage shops and resellers who are able to curate those pieces for you. So if you're like really hesitant about like the whole secondhand world, those are some awesome, great resources before you try to like dive headfirst into a thrift store. And the fifth part of the pyramid is to make. It might be surprising that it's so high up on the pyramid, but I think the only reason why it's higher up on the pyramid is like if you're making pieces with new material, it's like it's still like new resources that are being taken up compared to like if you're thrifting something, it's like old resources that have already been used. But if you're upcycling things and like you're making old pieces into new things, I think that's more like down here. I also just did a video, a DIY video. Like I made these like clay rings, and the beads on my ring, these are from like an old necklace that I had. But if you're buying like new beads, it's like a little bit higher up in the new buying section, so if that makes sense. But of course, when you make it, you know who already made it. It's you. So you already know the hands who made it. Hopefully you're not exploiting yourself to make your own pieces. You know who made your clothes, and I think that's a huge thing. And the sixth and final part of this pyramid is to buy. And like I said before, this is the last step you would take in this pyramid. And once you get to the conclusion that you are gonna buy something new, I would do the following. First, I would consider, I like to think of who made these pieces? Where are the fibers sourced from? What impact does this have on the environment? What are their sustainability initiatives? Are they thinking about the afterlife cycle? And honestly, the list can just go on and on, but I think just taking the time to just sit down and like kind of question the quality and ethicality of the pieces, I think you're able to get to a better conclusion of whether or not you really want those things. And it also reminds you of the true cost of like why you're buying what you're buying. Take a step back. Do I really need this? Oh, which actually goes into my next point, which is to think long term. There's so many cool trendy things out there, and it's like, oh, like I want like this like really cool funky thing. Before you buy that, really think about like, would I wear this in the next 5 years or longer? And if not, I would like take a step back if it's really something you want to do. But if you do want to try something more funky, first try to like thrift it or find a second hand before you buy it new. But I really like to see buying things as like a long-term investment as opposed to like a short-term. And the last part, once you're finally like ready of like, hey, I can see this in my wardrobe for a long time. 2, this brand aligns with my values and I'm okay with the work that they're doing. Then I would say to save up for that item. Sustainable fashion tends to be more expensive because they're actually properly paying their workers, the materials are better, overall there's like less exploitation going on. Because you're buying things less frequently, you're actually able to save up and invest in pieces that will last in your wardrobe for a really long time. If I bought a t-shirt from a fast fashion place, let's say like 15 bucks, it's probably not gonna last super long. You actually end up saving money in the long run because that $15 shirt will disintegrate, which I have learned that many times in the past. But then there are sustainable brands who might have a t-shirt that is more expensive, but with the higher quality that's behind it, it lasts me like forever. It's a long-term game, baby. Slow fashion is a long-term trajectory. And that's the whole thing. It's just like removing ourselves from the fast fashion industry that tells us that we have to buy things all the time. Now we can slow down, take a seat back, and we're chilling. We're chilling with our cool pieces that will last us a long time. And the 5th and most important step to quitting fast fashion is giving yourself grace and giving others grace. I always say that this is the most important step because within this community in general, I feel like it's so easy to be so hard on yourself and be so hard on others. But the thing is, like anything that we're learning in life, it takes failure and mistakes to learn. If you were learning a new instrument and like say like you picked up the piano, if you messed up first trying to play the piano, would you beat yourself up for not knowing it perfectly? No, you wouldn't. So why are we doing that to ourselves when we're trying to quit fast fashion in general and trying to do good? The fact that you are here, the fact that you are watching this video and are interested in doing that is just like already a huge step in itself, and everything that comes after this is just a part of your journey and a part of learning. And even people who are experts in the field, like going back to the piano reference, if you are an expert pianist, you never hit a point where you're like, I'm gonna stop learning, I'm gonna stop growing. Like I already learned everything that there needs to be learned about like the piano. No, because then they wouldn't be an expert for very long. Like you constantly have to keep learning and growing and engaging in conversations and just trying new things. I'm a sustainable fashion influencer, and with that, like I do consume a lot more than I want to, and I'm figuring out the balance and all that. I'm figuring out a lot of things, figuring out so much constantly daily. And the other part about this is that what ethical means really varies from person to person. Let's take the example of like vegan leather. For some people, that's an amazing sustainable option because you're not using animal products, but then on the other end, oh well, there's a lot of plastic being used instead of leather, which is like not super great either. I wouldn't say necessarily like either one is wrong. I have my own opinions in this, but that's a conversation and tension to be had, and I don't think we should attack one another for what we believe. The fact that we're even having the conversation is just so amazing in itself. And last part about this is that change only occurs once everyone tries to do everything imperfectly. And also there's this quote that I love that just kind of perfectly and imperfectly captures exactly what I'm trying to say, which is a quote by Zero Waste Chef that goes as, "We don't need a handful of people doing zero waste perfectly, we need millions of people doing it imperfectly." Which I know we're talking about sustainable fashion, but I really think that this just like kind of speaks to the entire sustainability movement in general, where change is only going to happen once a ton of us come together and imperfectly take steps for a better future than just relying on a few people that we believe are doing it completely perfectly, because that's not going to help anyone. And even those people that we deem to be experts, they have faults. They're human. They're gonna mess up. Looking back to when I first wanted to quit fast fashion, like this was like not a topic of conversation, but I feel like more and more people have like stepped up to the plate and like really pushing in whatever way they can to have this conversation go forward and to make change. And now it's more so of a conversation to be had. And I think that's really awesome, where like now sustainable fashion is a household topic, and I think that's just really, really cool. So just do the best you can. You don't know what's gonna happen, and don't let fear and failure stop you from doing that. So those are the 5 tips that I have for you. I hope that this inspires you to make the first step into quitting fast fashion, whichever shape, form that looks like for you. Let me know if you have any questions down below, and I continue to talk more about slow fashion and just like sustainable living in general on my different pages. So follow me on Instagram, TikTok, subscribe here now if you aren't already subscribed, and I'll just continue to provide resources and also just like show a normal human being just trying to figure it all out, because that's all we are. It's just a ton of normal human beings trying to figure everything out and just trying to make the world a better place. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye.